This is the Wandering Mike.
Welcome everyone to the Wandering Mike. Today I'm here with Nick. Hey Nick, how you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me on your show, Mike.
Of course, it's gonna be a nice conversation. I feel. We already talked a little bit, so I feel like we're gonna have a good flow going. Um, yeah, to get us started, if you just wanna tell us a little bit about yourself, give us a quick introduction in what your life has been like so far, what it is you're doing, anything you want to share.
Sure. So my name's Nick. I'm calling in from the great city of Philadelphia in the United States. Um, in my day job, I'm the CEO of Ideascale. We're the largest innovation software company in the world. We've got people in 8 or 9 countries. We've got customers in dozens of countries. So that's what I do professionally. In my personal life, I'm a big poker player. I read a lot. I'm trying to earn a second college degree along the way. And you said, what life has been like. My life has changed a lot in the past week. I became a father 5 days ago, so that, my life going forward is probably gonna be pretty different than what it's been for the last, 30 plus years of life. So, I'm beginning a new
Yeah,
adventure as we speak.
yeah. Congrats on that again. We already
Thank
talked
you.
about it, but that's very exciting. Um, and yeah, I also like that introduction because it gives us a picture of all the things you do. So maybe to start with a question that just came to my mind very spontaneously is, as a CEO, I would imagine you have a lot of things to do. Where do you find the time and maybe more so the energy to pursue all these hobbies, to pursue a second degree? And yeah, obviously now the baby is going to take off a lot of time as well, I suppose.
Sure. So that's a tough question, but I'll try and give a good answer. So, firstly, is what's called selection bias. People who become CEOs, they were probably really energetic and hardworking in the first place, so they have more time because they're really
Right.
efficient with their time. So that the type of person who has the job that I do probably already is very good at using their time. But then, secondly, I do have to make sacrifice. I still at the same end of the day, no matter how efficient I am with my time, I still only have 24 hours, right? Time and tide wait for
Right.
no man. Um, and so what that means is the way I allocate those 24 hours in my day are probably a bit different than many other folks. Number one, I basically cut out all the stuff that doesn't give me joy. It's very what is it, Mary Kondo,
Mm.
like throw out all the stuff that doesn't give you joy. So I don't watch a lot of TV because TV doesn't give me joy, but I play a lot of poker because poker does give me joy. Uh, I don't, there's a bunch of stuff that I don't do. Basically, I've started to cut out, not started, been cutting out all the stuff that is not happy for me in life and really focus on the stuff that gives me happiness and joy, whether that be poker, whether that be running, reading, now spending time with my son. Um, it also means that other things have cut out. I probably sleep less than the average person. My wife likes to joke that I can't sit still unless I'm doing something. So if I'm sitting in a
Mm.
chair, I need to be reading, I need to be studying, I need to be, playing a game, doing something. I cannot sit still.
Right. Um, I feel like that's also something, or let me rephrase that. I personally had to learn that as well. That because if you're in that position where you come home, you put on Netflix, and that's kind of what you enjoy. But for me, also, when I found things that I like, active things I like to do, like read more, get into this podcasting, and you realize that it's these things that actually, even though they might consume more energy on the like superficial level, those are the things that really do bring, like you said, the happiness. And then it is kind of getting easier to, oh yeah, no, I don't want to waste 2 hours watching this movie. I want to use the 2 hours to do something. So yeah, that definitely
Yeah.
makes a lot of
And again,
sense.
there's certain movies that give me joy. I'll go watch them, but I won't just go turn on Netflix to go kill 2 hours because Netflix is available.
Yeah. Um, so you were talking about the company that you are the CEO of, Ideascale. So um maybe if you just want to tell us in a little bit more detail what it is exactly you do, and maybe before that or after, tell us how you personally get interested in the topics and the issues that you handle with your business.
Sure. So Ideascale has been around for about 15 years. We're not a startup, we're like a mid-sized company now. And what our software does, you can kind of think of it like TikTok for ideas. When you go on
Mm,
TikTok, put a funny dance video or you put a funny picture of a cat or your, art or whatever, you put something funny or in social in there. And then other people voted up or down, and the algorithms combined with people's votes make certain TikTok videos go viral. That's what TikTok
right.
does. Now imagine you do that with ideas. Imagine a social network where everybody is submitting their ideas, and those could be ideas for new products, ideas for new political campaigns, ideas for what snacks should be in your company fridge, whatever sort of ideas. And then other people around your company, around your team, or around the world that could be just ordinary citizens are voting on those ideas. They're voting on this new product, whether
Right.
it's a good product or not. Your colleagues are voting around what snacks they want in the office fridge. And then the best ideas rise to the top. So that's what Ideascale's product does. We are a social network for ideas. And this social network can be available to the entire public or can be available within a company. We've been around, as I said, like 15 years. Our customers include major organizations like Pfizer, which is the biggest pharmaceutical company in the world, Comcast, the US Post Office. I don't think we have any customers in New Zealand right now, but we have customers in Australia and Hong Kong and India. So
Right.
truly a global organization. And I get to, it's so fun for me to help ideas come to both capture great ideas and watch those great ideas come to life for our customers. How I got into this is kind of more coincidence than anything else. My career is divided into 3 chunks. I was the first chunk of my career, I was headed towards a career in academia as a PhD in physics. I didn't go get the final degree in physics. I didn't become a professor, but I did some research along the way. The second phase I spent on Wall Street as a professional investor doing private equity and hedge fund deals. And for the last 5 or so years, I have become a professional CEO, where either founders, private equity firms, venture capitalists call me up when when their companies are ready for professional executives to take over. So somebody who can take a company that's doing well and make it do extraordinary. That's what I do for a living. So Ideascale, the founders got made this a very successful company. They made it a global company, but they were ready for someone to take this to $100 million, $1 billion company. And so they brought me on to help Ideascale with that last phase of its journey. I've been here now 2 years and really excited to help lead it into this success. Since I've been here, we've gone from basically 2 or 3 country organization to now 8 or 9 countries. We've added customers in a whole bunch of countries we weren't in before. And we're actually launching some really cool new products for the first time in the company's history in about a month, like totally new products, not just new features.
Oh, I guess you can't tell us anything about
Oh,
those,
no, it's
but
public. It's not secret. It's part of our
oh, it
roadmap.
is.
So, there's 4 things that are coming out. Number 1, so, the social network for ideas that I was talking about, that's what we've done for 15 years. It's very successful. It's our core product. The new
Right.
things that are coming out are in January, and this is on all our public roadmap. Number 1 is this AI analytics tool. And I know everyone's talking about AI. We didn't create a chatbot or anything. Go use ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever. What
Mm,
we created was an AI tool that takes all of these ideas and helps you automatically figure out which ideas are good or bad. And that's something it's
mm,
really hard for AI to do, but I think we figured out a pretty cool way of doing that. Second, and by the way, it doesn't just figure out that an idea is good. It says this idea is good for you, Mike, or this idea is good for Pfizer. It
right.
personalizes. So, like, using a silly example, the diet or exercise routine that is best for you may be something very different from me because my needs are different than yours. And that you can think of it for a company too. Pfizer needs a very different type of idea than does the US Post Office, than does Tesla, right? So that's
Yeah.
product number 1 that's coming out I think in January. Number 2, is we revamped our entire whiteboarding solution. So we have a pure digital whiteboard. What's cool is it is kind of a standalone product that is totally accessible to everyone, super easy to use, kind of like some of the other applications out there, but it's integrated into our core idea management application. And then the third is project management software. So as I talked about, we're really focused on what good ideas there are, but now with this new product that we're launching helps you take those ideas and turn them into actual actions, into projects, things in the real world. So we're pretty excited about the stuff coming out in the next couple of months.
Yeah, that sounds really cool, actually. Um, so I really like the base idea of it all. Like you said, the main product, the social media, um, and obviously, well, I say obviously, but now that you told me about it, that is something that definitely was missing. Because, or let me ask you this as a question. So, in a normal company life, so it's a company, what do you think are the most or the hardest obstacles of finding new ideas? Why do you think, without having a social media for ideas, why is it hard to find new ideas?
Sure. So the good news is most companies tend to have people who have interesting ideas. There's most people, and maybe not 100% of people, but 5% of people, 10% of people have cool ideas. But the two problems
Yeah,
they encounter that any large company encounters is number one, how do you get the idea from the person who has it to the CEO or the senior person who can make the idea reality, right? So imagine someone, a junior analyst or junior researcher in the Japanese office has a great idea, but the company's based in France. There's a language barrier there. There's a seniority barrier. There's a country barrier, a time zone barrier. That's really
yeah,
hard. And that could be, by the way, the janitor in an office in a New York office building. The CEO sits on the 35th floor. He may see the CEO walk by. It's with security every day, but he's not getting to hang out with him, or doesn't get 5 minutes to tell him the CEO their idea. That's number one. There's hierarchical problems. But number two is or hierarchical distance problems. That's not a problem for a 10-person company where you're all sitting next to each other. But when you're 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 people, it's
right.
really hard for good ideas to get to the top or to the people who can make decisions. The second is in any large company, there's lots of ideas. That means and not all ideas are good ideas, right?
Mm,
And that's okay, by the way. You need to wade through a lot of crappy ideas to find the good stuff. The American expression being a diamond in the rough. Um,
right.
so the second problem that large organizations face is even if they manage to they have a list of giant ideas, how do they figure out which ideas are good or bad? Do you have one person, a sole job is to go through and say like, good idea, good box, bad idea? That would be an insanely difficult job because one person would now have to know about everything that company does. They would need to be able to do in the R&D and the manufacturing and the HR and the office snacks. No one person is that smart, no matter who they are. So those are the two problems. Number one, how do you get ideas in front of the people who make a difference? And number two, how do you make sure only good ideas, not the bad stuff? Um, and
Right.
most organizations struggle with this. They basically don't have a good solution for this problem, which is good for us, obviously, because that if they didn't have a problem that we weren't solving, we wouldn't have a company. Um,
Yeah.
so, but it's a really difficult problem. But again, technology is really cool because, in general, I'm not just talking about us. Technology is cool because it observes these problems that human beings or human organizations face and tries to solve them, right? And that's true whether you talk about accounting software, auto driving software. Like a silly example is your car nowadays beeps when you're falling asleep, right? Because car
Right.
companies realize that hey, people do fall asleep while driving, and that's dangerous. So let's let the car warn you when you're falling asleep and wake you up.
Yeah. And I just also feel like um, it's a really good thing that we have this on a global level as well. Like you said, if we're talking about really big companies that have branches in different countries, and then because I can imagine that the insights of people in India, of people in Indonesia, of people in Spain, Portugal, are different from someone that lives in New York City. So um, that's obviously something we never had. Like maybe I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, you were just talking to the person next to you. We're talking with the people that were in your close distance, and now we can do it on a worldwide scale. And I suppose this really opened up the whole idea thing as well.
Well, you're absolutely right, and it's actually even deeper than that. If you think about how human beings evolved, we evolved to live in villages of basically 50 people. And there's some really
Right?
cool psychological research on this that like we basically don't our brain capacity is not designed to have relationships with more than 50 people or 20 people. It's really hard for us to keep track
Mm,
of that in our head and have any sort of emotion. So for thousands of years or for tens of thousands of years, our entire biology was designed for us to talk with people who lived in our own tiny village, whether that be village in Switzerland, a village in India, a village in North America. And so all of a sudden, real over the past literally, 40 or 50 years, I mean, let's say maybe 100 years, right? Post-industrial revolution, all of a sudden we've had
yep.
cities where there's hundreds of thousands of people. And then we've had companies. 100
Yeah.
years ago, companies were still a few thousand people. And now we have Amazon, which employs like 1 million people, right? So we have companies now that are bigger than like countries used to be 100 years ago. Um,
Yeah.
and that is insane. And our brains aren't designed to do that naturally. Our biology isn't designed to do that. And that's where, again, where software like ours or social media software in general is really empowering because it helps us bridge those distances that our biology wasn't necessarily designed to do really well.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I just had another spontaneous question come to me. It's relatively biased because before I came to New Zealand, I was working in a big contact center in Portugal. And what I kind of grew frustrated in working there um, was because I was the head of the training department there. So I kind of had a lot of ideas. I had a lot of things that I wanted to change. And in my subjective opinion, I always felt like profitability was more important to the company than innovation. So, um, do you feel like a lot of big companies have that same scale of importance where it's like, oh, this is working, this is profitable, we don't want to innovate? Or maybe do you see it differently?
So stupid companies have that perspective, right? Because think about it, like in a capitalist society, if you're a very profitable company and you're not innovating, someone is eventually going to copy your idea and your profits go away. Competition over time means profits go down. That's why restaurants don't make a lot of money because there's 1,000. It's not that hard for if you have a really fancy steak restaurant, you're making a lot of money. It's really easy for someone to open that exact same restaurant across the street and you both have to lower prices. That's the fundamentals of what makes capitalism a really good system that you basically can't keep doing the same thing over and over. Otherwise, someone copies you. And a really like that's a
Right.
theoretical example. Let's use a really accurate example that really happened recently. Intel, the biggest maker of computer chips for the last 60 years, they invented the semiconductor industry, right? Moore's Law is named after Intel's former CEO. Um, and
Mm,
the Intel for the longest time was innovation, but they basically fell down. They focused on the wrong types of innovation. They were actually spending a lot of money on R&D too, but the wrong types of innovation. And so they fell behind, right? They fell behind TSMC, they fell behind Nvidia, even in some cases AMD, who was a second tier rival for
mm,
many for the past 25 years. And what that's meant is now Intel is having to lay off thousands of people. Their CEOs, executives are being laid off, and the stock price has fallen by a lot. So companies that prioritize short-term profitability, yes, they may make higher profits in the short term, but every organization needs to innovate because in a capitalist society, if you're not innovating, you're falling behind. My favorite quote on this is, "If you're not innovating, remember your competitor definitely is." Someone somewhere is innovating and they are out there to beat you because if you're making $1 billion, someone out there wants to take that $1 billion away from you and they're going to work really hard to take it.
yeah, that definitely makes sense. And that's definitely how uh, companies should act, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah, again, companies don't have to, they can do whatever they want, but the research is very clear. This is not my opinion. There's a bunch of like great academic research on this. Companies that underinvest in innovation broadly defined, they tend to, within about 10 years, fall way behind their competition, in some cases with catastrophic and existential consequences.
Right. So, in your opinion, what's the most effective way to build a innovation culture in your company and then also sustain that culture over a long period of time?
Sure. Sustaining is actually pretty easy because innovation tends to be a virtuous cycle. Once you become innovative, you tend to attract innovative people. You continue doing innovative things. That's a good news. Building an innovative culture is actually pretty difficult. The good news is there is a right way to do it, and it's a recipe. Um, there's two, and I'll provide the simple version of the recipe. But if you want the long, complicated version of the recipe, the International Standards Organization actually published the recipe about 3 months ago under ISO standard
Oh,
56001. They're the same guys that decide the size, what how USB keys should be, or what the Bluetooth code looks like. So it's just kind of
right.
funny. They make standards for everything. They made a standard for innovation. But there's three things you need to build an innovation culture. Number one, you need a critical mass of people who are innovative. The number tends to be around 10%. So if at least 10% of your staff wants to be doing creative things, that's good. Number two, you need the right incentives. A lot of organizations, they don't reward employees for doing creative and innovative things, and they penalize them for trying things that fail. And experimentation always will fail. That's okay, right? Creativity results in a lot of failure. So, number two is you have to create incentives where people feel comfortable and safe trying new things, suggesting ideas. So you can tell your boss, hey, I have this great idea without them saying, shut up and go back to work. And
Yeah.
that's silly, but a lot of companies actually do that. I've experienced that myself in my own career. And the third thing is the right tools and technology. Um, and by this I mean like the analogy is imagine you have a great athlete, somebody who wants to go to the Olympics. They're super motivated. They've got the incentives, but then you say, we're not going to give you a pair of shoes and we're not going to give you a coach. You have to run barefoot. That would be crazy for us to do. So, the third thing you need to do is once you have the right people and you've created the right incentives, give them the right tools, resources, technologies so they can succeed, so they can actually innovate. You would not make an artist go paint without a paintbrush, right? That would be crazy. But unfortunately, a lot of organizations, once they hire all these really smart people, they say, okay, go be creative. Does that mean how do they do it? What resources do they have? You have to think that through and actually give them the resource and technology to do that.
Yeah. Um, so stepping away from innovation a little bit, but something that was of interest to me when you just explained all that, I just saw a parallel, maybe also to your life and you being a CEO now, and you especially saying like these companies hire you for that last step. Um, so this is also about people that are very ambitious in their work, because you took us a little bit through your journey of how you got there, and maybe if you can just talk to or tell people about how that whole journey was for you, because obviously now you're in that position, but for a lot of people, that is a impossible position to ever be in. If there's people that are very ambitious, they're at work every day, they're doing their best, and um, they want to be in a CEO position, they want to take on responsibilities, they want to climb that ladder. Like, what can you share with people on how you, because I can also imagine that there were setbacks, that there were times where you also think that wouldn't be possible. So yeah, if you just want to take us through that journey.
Yeah. Firstly, yes, there have been setbacks, right? There have been lots of jobs which I applied for and didn't get. There's been, colleges that I tried to get into and was rejected from, jobs that I've left due to disagreements. There's been lots of setbacks along the way. I launched a small hedge fund that didn't succeed, right? So I was a failed entrepreneur at one
Mm.
point too. So lots of setbacks and failures. And that was right at COVID. So I was out there job hunting, when no one in the world
Mm.
is hiring. Um, so I would say, look, rising to the position of CEO somewhere is a combination of kind of three or four things. Number one, you do need certain talent levels, right? You need a certain amount of IQ, you need a certain amount of ambition, you need a certain amount of people skills. There's certain like raw abilities you need. Number two, you need a lot of hard work over many, many years. It's not like you are brilliant today and a year later somebody hires you to be CEO of $1 billion company. It requires in many cases decades of work. And a lot of people are willing to work hard for 6 months or a year. They're not willing to work hard for decades. right? In my own case,
Right.
for example, I graduated at the top of my class in high school, near the top of my class in undergraduate, at the top of my class in business school, and then worked, was at the top of each of my companies that I worked for a long time. So it required a lot of demonstrated skills so that other people would ultimately
Right.
trust me to be CEO, right? Remember, when you become CEO, someone really rich and powerful generally has said, "Hey, I trust you enough to give you the keys to the car or the keys to the kingdom." And that's a lot
Yeah.
of responsibility. And then third is luck, right? So you can have all the talent in the world, you can work really hard, and you can just get unlucky. In my case, I was very fortunate when I came to Ideascale. It was actually luck that I was recruited to here because someone that I'd spoken with 2 or 3 years ago, he'd offered me a job, and I respectfully had told him, "No, I'm not interested in this because it was a healthcare related job, and I'm not super interested in healthcare." But I impressed him enough that 2 years later, even though we didn't talk for 2 years, he called me up and said, "Hey, Nick, I've got a friend who's looking for a CEO. Are you interested?" And so that's lucky, right? Someone I hadn't remembered 2 years later, I'd made such a good impression on him that he called me up and, did me a favor, even though I'd never done anything for him. I'd never met the guy. We'd had 2 phone calls together. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's luck more so than anything. It's, I don't want to say it's either because I'm such a great person. It's truly luck. And I think people have to appreciate that a lot of what happens in life can be lucky or unlucky, right? You could be the great. There was in Philadelphia, there was uh, a famous athlete. I'm blanking on his name. Just a year ago, at the top of his career, I think in the NHL, right? A super successful
Yeah.
athlete. He got hit by a car by a drunk driver, and that is just bad luck, right? He did everything right in life. He was the top of his sport, playing at an elite level, and then gets hit by a car by a drunk driver, and that's bad luck. Luck is also works positively,
Right.
right? People become billionaires because they were. If you were at Microsoft in the 1980s, right, you didn't have to be the greatest programmer in the world. You're a very rich person today. Uh, so that's what I mean. We people. I want to emphasize that luck is an important aspect of many things in life, both good and bad luck, and we have to be cognizant that sometimes luck goes in our favor and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. That's actually a comforting fact as well. If you kind of can accept that and
It's difficult to
uh,
accept. We like to believe that life is in our control, but so much of what it isn't, right? There's some brilliant people, um, uh, born in all parts of the world where they don't get access to education. They may not have electricity. I grew up in India till the age of 5, and I didn't have running water or regular electricity, right? And I was living in a
um,
middle class town. I can't imagine the situations of the billion other people in India who at that time didn't have any electricity access, right?
right.
And some of those people may be extraordinarily talented, but were born into bad situations due to no fault of their own, bad luck. And good luck is also a thing. So I think we have to be very honest with ourselves as human beings, individuals in society, that luck plays a huge part in life outcomes, both at an individual level and at a national level.
Yeah. Um, so I definitely want to look a little bit more into your hobbies and your things that you do outside of your work, because I also believe that we can learn from people by what they do and what they choose to spend their time on, as we have already like discussed a little bit um, as well. But before I do that, there is actually a question that I ask every single guest. So I'm very interested. Um, is there any, so it can either be a religious, spiritual belief or also just some sort of philosophical belief that really guides your life, that you hold dearly, that helps you in how you journey through life?
So I would say no, probably to a spiritual or religious belief system. My parents were largely, maybe nominally Hindu, mostly agnostic. Um,
Mm.
and they raised me to be like largely, agnostic as well. But what I would say spiritually, yes, there's kind of, I believe that we all have a purpose on this world. And that purpose is to contribute in there's 4 dimensions that every human being should be contributing to, which is family, religion, community, and work. And it doesn't matter. Your mix of those 4 things could be very different than mine. Mine could be very different than yours. But it's actually funny. That's like if you look at the great philosopher of the world, whether you look in the Asian philosophers or Western philosophers, in different words, they basically said, look, to give life meaning while you're on this world for 60 to 100 years, you basically got to do something for someone, whether that be for your church, whether that be for your community, whether that be for your family, whether that be for your work. If you don't do one of those four things, life ends up kind of empty. And so I really keep that spirit, that belief system in mind that, hey, if I'm here, I should be contributing to one of those, at least one of those four pillars, hopefully all of them over my life.
All right. That's a that's a pretty good thing to aim for. Um, so you mentioned that you like to spend your time reading a lot. So because obviously there is nuances why people read. So for you personally, what is the biggest thing that you get out of reading?
I get two things out of reading. Number one um, is cool stories, right? Sometimes sometimes I read really interesting, deep philosophical work, and sometimes it's just junk fantasy fiction. It's just fun to be caught up in a great story. Um, so that's number one. Number two is once in a while I read something that makes me feel like the author like I'll use a religious term, even though we just talked about religion, like they were felt by they were working with through the hands of God, right? So for example, I'm reading Paradise Lost, which just coincidentally happens to be a religious poem. But like in reading the first two chapters, it made me feel, or the first two books, I should say, it's a 9 or 10 book giant poem. I don't know if you read it, but this guy wrote it while blind, dictating it to his daughters in dreams that he got every night. And then he'd wake up every morning and dictate it to his daughter. And you could feel like it felt like God was speaking to this guy, just how beautifully the lines are written. Um, so it's wonderful to read something so that is so like artistically beautiful or religiously beautiful, something so immense that makes you feel like this person was such an extraordinary contributor to humankind.
All right. I actually heard of that book, so I've never read it, so maybe
I highly
I
recommend it
have
if
to.
you've got like 25 or 30 hours of like time. It's dense. It's probably one of the 5 or 6 most famous poems in the English language. Uh,
Right.
but certainly one of the longest poems in the English language.
Um, but that actually transitions nicely to the other question I wanted to ask. And obviously, I don't know if you have anything ready on the top of your head, but as someone who actually enjoys reading a lot, and I do read a lot as well, I'm always curious about book recommendations. So I don't know if there is like one or two books where you could really say, "Hey, Mike, you should read these books. I got a lot of value out of them."
Sure, I would say 2 books. I'll give one fancy or one like fun one and one technical one. The fun one is the Foundations. Sorry, is Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert Heinlein. It's one of the most famous science fiction books ever written. He's the guy who wrote
Mm,
Starship Troopers. I don't know if you've seen the movie Starship Troopers, but he's the same guy who wrote that.
yeah.
Stranger in a Strange Land, very good book. Really philosophical and interesting, but a fun story. Even if you ignore all the philosophy and the politics in it, it's just a fun story. Um, and the second one is a more technical recommendation. It's a book called Valuation by Aswad Damodar, and he's a professor of finance at NYU. And why this book is
Mm,
really cool is it tells you why like it explains capitalism down at the company level, why some companies are good, why some are bad. Why is Amazon worth $1 trillion and Nick's orange juice stand is worth $100? Where do these numbers come from? What's the difference between $100 and $1 trillion? Why? Right? Like Amazon is bigger,
really?
but there's lots of big companies that tend to be frauds. Like, why is Amazon not a fraud? Right. So this book actually it does a really good job explaining that. Only problem is it does require a bunch of math, like high school math, but it's tough reading. It's not a bedtime read.
Right. Well, it does sound interesting, though. I'm always looking into things where I don't know that much yet. So that actually Sounds like a nice because yeah, now I'm actually wondering. Obviously, you don't have to spoil the contents of the book, but now I'm like, yeah, where do these numbers come from? You know, and someone for some time I watched a lot of Shark Tank as well. You probably know the show. Yeah, and I'm always wondering, oh, 10% for 300K. I'm like, do they just make up these numbers? Where does that come from?
So they're not actually making up the numbers, although it sometimes sounds like it. They're doing quick versions of the real math that that the book tells you about. So there's the real math, which you
Right.
probably need a spreadsheet to do. You probably need some pen and paper, and but with the because the people on Shark Tank have done this a million times, they know roughly
Mhm.
what the right answer is. So they're using the real math, but using like simplified versions of the real math that they can do in their own head because they don't have a computer in front of them.
Oh, right. Yeah, so that actually got me intrigued to
Yeah,
look into that
they're
more.
generally not making up stuff. Some of them are. The smarter ones are basically doing dumbed down version of the real math so they can do it live on TV really fast.
Right. Um, so yeah, again, very good transition because we were talking about maths. So the other thing you said you really get joy out of is poker. So you say you enjoy playing poker, and especially in Portugal, but also back in Germany. We did some poker with my friends as well, and I was always more the kind of feeling player. I was kind of like going, obviously understanding the basics, but being like playing the man, sort of. And then a lot of my friends were always very stuck with odds, like, okay, I have this, he raised that, and like really being very mathematical about it. So Um, to ask you again, so what is it for you personally about poker? What is it that fascinates
Sure. I think there's three things. Number one, I do enjoy the mathematics. That I was a mathematics major in college. That's what I studied.
you?
Excuse me. And part of my brain just likes math, right? So that's number one. Poker does involve a lot of math, and I like that. It lets me flex a muscle that I don't, that I enjoy flexing. Um, Number two is I like that it's competitive. I'm a very competitive guy, and it's fun to do something competitive. In a low risk way. Number three, it's social. So I really like the fact that in a poker table, you can sit down and you may have people from all around the world. You may have some rich people, you may have some poor people, and no one cares. You're going to have people of different races and genders. No one cares that you're a German guy living in New Zealand and I'm an Indian guy living in the United States. And there's a woman, a
Right.
woman from Africa sitting across the table. We're all just people. And that's really unique. I actually played poker in Germany once in Berlin last year.
Oh,
And I think we had a Ukrainian guy who didn't speak any English, a bunch of German guys. We had two women from somewhere in the Caribbean, right? And we weren't even speaking the same language, and yet we were drinking together, we were talking together, and that's fun.
yeah.
And then the fourth thing is I like that poker has an element of risk because one of the cool things about any card game actually is you can do everything right, but luck can go against you. I like that element of like that you can do everything right and you can get unlucky, or conversely, you can do everything wrong and sometimes you can get lucky. I've seen lots of really bad
Yeah.
players just get lucky once in a while. And there's a final thing of just like it's fun to do something that gives you joy in life, right? And poker gives me a lot of joy.
That's cool. Um, well, I don't know if I'm making too much out of it, but is there things that you also took away from playing poker that you learned on the poker table that you can use in everyday life?
Yeah, there are actually two things. So firstly is I misunderstood why people, were playing poker. Like I gave you like four or five reasons uh,
Mm.
that I think that I've thought through why I play poker, why it gives me joy, right? And number one, before when I started playing poker, I made the assumption that everyone knew why they were at the poker table, right? That they were trying to make money or they were trying to kill time. And a lot of people are just doing playing poker because that's what they've always done. Their dads taught it to them, 50 years ago, and it's just a hobby without knowing, or some are trying to win money, but they don't actually know how to win money, right? So I had the lesson I took away was there's a lot of people who are doing actions in life that they haven't thought through why are they doing those actions in the
Mm.
first place. Right? When I go to run, I run because it improves my health and because I like the feeling of wind on my face. That's very simple, right? But I didn't appreciate that a lot of people do things in life due to habit rather than having thought through actively why they do those things. That's number one. Um, Number two is uh, I hadn't appreciated that some people actively don't want to learn how to do things better. So in poker, it's actually really funny. If you're playing
Mm.
poker well, anything beyond the super amateur levels, it requires a lot of math and understanding the mechanics of the game. And one of the things I've
Yeah.
learned during poker is a lot of people say like, no, we'd refuse to learn it because I've been playing the game this 40 years for this way. And it's funny because they've been losing money for 40 years and they actually think it's too beneath them to go learn how to play the game well. And that's something I never appreciate because at least in my life, if I do something badly, I want to go learn how to do it better. Even if I think I'm good, I look around to make sure I'm actually good at something versus, you don't want to assume you're good at something just because you are not looking around well enough or observant of your own skills. So that really surprised me that like there was a disdain by some people to want to learn how to play the game better. And that's true in life too, that a lot of people have disdain for other ways of doing things, right? When I worked in New York hedge fund land, there was a prevalence
Hmm.
of focusing, this is how hedge funds have been run for 30 or 40 years. So this is the right way to invest. Um, Rather than learning that there's these new data sets coming out and new techniques of investing that are going to, out innovate them actually. And that's what's happened actually in the hedge fund industry. Almost no hedge funds actually make money anymore unless they're quantitative data driven hedge funds because the traditional hedge funds have not been innovative as they should have over the last 30 or 40 years or the last 20, I should say.
Right. Those were actually very profound insights.
I
That
apologize. Did not mean to be profound. They're just things I've learned. And
no, that's all right. That's wonderful. Um, because my follow-up question on that would actually be, any tips that maybe you can give to people. I know it's hard from the outside looking in, but um, maybe someone just realized, oh yeah, I never thought about why I do things. Oh, I never um, like or yeah, there is something that I just told myself I didn't want to get better. But also maybe there is, like you said, just people that are very happy with where they are and they don't need and want to put that effort in to become better at something. But just to really have a healthy self-awareness kind of and just ask these questions and see what the honest true answers are. What can you give tips to people?
sure, I'll give one tip and then one word of advice. I'll start with the word of advice. Look, if you people are very good at lying to themselves, and that's a really deeply held characteristic. And some people are very honest with themselves, right? I'm 5'6". I'm not the tallest guy in the world. I'm very honest that I'm a pretty short guy. A lot of people would
Mm.
pretend that they're, they would say like, I'm 5'8", I'm 5'10". No, you can't lie to yourself about, things. It's the first step to having kind of an honest discussion with yourself is not lying to yourself. Um, the practical tip is one, assuming you are capable of being honest with yourself. The tip to like analyzing yourself is I'm going to steal something from Mary Kondo's book, I don't know if you read it. It's about like throwing away junk in your house, but the same applies to junk in your life. So make a list. She said, make a list of everything in your house. Look at what, if it gives you happiness, keep it. If it doesn't give you happiness, toss it in the garbage. You can do the same thing
Right.
with time. So make a list of everything you did for the past week. Keep a journal saying I spent from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m., I did this activity. Look through that list and figure out, did it create value for you? Right? Like, did you
Mm.
go to work? If you go to work to just make money, that's okay, by the way, because it created value through the money. It created for you the employment. Right? But if you spent 2 hours watching a Netflix movie that you didn't even like, right? What could you have done with that 2 hours? You could have gone to the gym. You could have eaten. Like, eating gives you some people a lot of joy. Like, make that list and then just like Mary Kondo
Yeah.
says, spend like 10 minutes looking through, hey, this made my life better or worse. and then just start throwing stuff in the trash for the stuff that is not giving you joy in your life, and then you can improve your life significantly.
Yeah. Um, I feel like we just naturally got to that question, but it is a question that I sometimes ask on the podcast. It is a rather broad one, but take it in whatever direction you want to. So, for you personally, what do you think will make or is happy and fulfilled life?
I would say if a happy and fulfilled life, I've achieved three things. Mm. Number one, my family knows that I was there for them. That means my parents, my wife, my now kid, any future kids I have, whatever, know that I was there for them. They remember that I was always there for them when the need arose. That's number one. Number two, professionally, I would like to know that I built something, and built something could be I created 5 jobs, or I built a company, or like I did something that someone somewhere will remember professionally. And it doesn't have to remember for 100 years. It just had to. I created 5 jobs. That would be a nice feeling. Um, and then third, personally, I would like to, die knowing that I never gave up my love of learning. That was something that was imparted to me by my grandmother, who was, very pivotal to me in my life. It's a core value that I have, that learning is not just to get a better job or to get make more money, but you do it because it's an important part of being a human being. And I would like to know that, hey, when I die, I will continue learning throughout my life. I'd like, I'll die
Yes.
with a book in my hand probably, or a computer
Yeah.
chip that's feeding books into my brain. Whatever the 30-year future version of this is.
Well, since you brought that up, and I know we're both just having opinions on this, but what is your opinion on that whole development of us becoming cyborgs, basically?
So look, we are slowly heading towards that, right? If you look back, 1,000 years, the only way we could communicate with each other, or not thousand, let's say 5,000 years, was through words. And at some point, we started using these tools called paper and books. And so we started communicating and recording language that way. And then we moved from books to tablets, right? Like my wife and I argue about this all the time. She likes physical books. And I read a lot of physical books when I was younger, but now all of my books are ebooks, right? Um, so we have progressively changed the way we store, transfer, and communicate technology. And now we don't have to read ebooks. You can ask ChatGPT or some Gemini for the bullets behind those ebooks. So we
Mm,
are moving towards cyborgs, whether we like it or not, right? We have a lot of people have heart implants, they have eye implants, we transfer knowledge through different mediums than we did 5,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago. So I would say number one, my opinion on it doesn't matter. We are headed that way. And someone who doesn't adopt these technologies is at such a disadvantage. Imagine a caveman from 10,000 years showed up today and he says, or he or she says, I refuse to use tablets. They could have all the IQ points in the world. They would be so far behind if right? They would just be unable to exist in the modern world. Um, so my opinion, candidly, doesn't matter. Technology continues to progress. It continues to make it difficult for those who don't adapt that technology to remain relevant or even participate in the modern day world, right? If you don't learn how to read and write, 150 years, that was okay. If you don't know how to read and write today, you can't do anything. You can't vote today, right? If you can't read and write your name. Whereas
yeah.
150 years ago, you could vote with a thumbprint. In fact, in India, as recently as like 60 years ago, you could vote with a thumbprint. But today, you need to be able to read and write.
Oh, oh, that's an interesting side fact.
Well, because like lots of
I
people
did.
weren't literate. Most of the world, even in the developed world, right? Like only what is it, 20 or 30% of Americans were literate 100 years ago, right?
Right. Right.
Beyond basic literacy, like the ability to read a book is actually pretty recent. It's really occurred over the last 100 years in the Western world, and in the developing world over the last broad spread literacy over the last 50 or 60 years.
Mm. Um, something I just personally always like to ask as well when we are talking about technology and obviously talking about the positive things that technology definitely brings with itself. Um, but in your opinion, how important is it for humans to also cherish and basically use the connection to nature that we have? what do you think the value is in that?
So look, you're asking me a really difficult question on two levels. Number one, I don't know much, I'm not a philosopher of nature or the natural world. Number two, I personally don't feel a connection to nature except maybe when running and feeling the wind on my face, right? And I can feel that same
Right.
wind, by the way, in driving a car and sticking my head out the window like a dog, which I do. So what I'll say is like, I personally don't feel that, connection to nature is a core part of my human experience, but I am certainly not qualified to speak on whether it is essential for us as a species.
That's very fair. Um, so I will use the last couple of minutes we got together to actually talk about something we already discussed briefly before, but I just feel like I will never have the chance again to talk about battle rap because it is something that I really like. And when I found out that you enjoy the art form as well, yeah, I just really wanted to have it have it on the episode. Um, so yeah, if you just want to tell us what it is that fascinates you about the art form and why you basically watched it and are entertained by it.
Yeah. By the way, for your audience who doesn't know what battle rap is, think of watching 8 Mile, or it's a bunch of people rapping at each other live in a competition, and the crowd votes on who won the fight. So instead of fists, it's with words. So
Yeah,
I've been a follower of battle rap for about 10 or 15 years since for those who really know this in America, since the grind time, when KOTD was still rising, King of the Dot was still
right,
rising, when grind time was still around, when the Ultimate Rap League was still around.
right.
All these leagues either folded, merged over time. Now there's KOTD and one or two other major leagues. Um, I think there's a couple things I love about it. Number one, especially the style that was common 10 years ago, it's decreased a little bit. There were a lot of funny jokes. There were just a lot of funny jokes. Um,
Yeah.
Number two is the complexity of some of the language. I love reading, as we talked about earlier, and sometimes these battle rappers have come up with just insanely interesting, creative phrases or paragraphs in poetic form that they can deliver while performing with physical body language. And I love just seeing the really creative turns of language where somebody can write an entire like 1 minute long speech that all relates to some crazy theme that is all related to the competitor's name. I couldn't do that. It's wonderful to
Mm.
see somebody who has that extraordinary level of talent. Um, and number three is it's a spectacle, right? In the same way that some people like watching football, there's an entire element of spectacle to it, a performance art. It's a
Mhm.
physical presence. Rappers who just sit there like with their hands like the battle rappers just sit there with their hands like this and don't move, don't have gyration, don't have physical presence and charisma aren't as successful. So it's a performance art. And I like that in the same way. Again, like some people like football or baseball or you're a non-American football, soccer.
Yeah,
I think you're in New Zealand, so like rugby, right? I don't quite get rugby,
right.
but it's a huge sport for many people around the world, and it's a spectacle sport in the same way that battle rap is for me.
Yeah,
By the way,
and
I'll spend a moment just shout. I want one quick anecdote here. My favorite battle
yeah.
rapper is this guy named Soul Khan. He was one of the best in the world for like a long time, and many of his the terms that he used were really offensive. And what's funny is he went through a political change in his personal life, and he retired for a while and was really saddened by some of the horrible things he said while being super competitive. And then he came back like 2 or 3 years ago, and now he's battle rapping and competing at the elite levels without actually saying any offensive things. And that's really interesting to see in an art form where a lot of
Mhm.
people say some really awful things at times. So usually like as a joke, but still they can be awful. And now Soul Khan is able to do this in a way that is actually not offensive. And that's really interesting to compete at an elite level in this, art form using a very, very different style than everyone else.
Yes. Well, what I would even say to that is that, like you said, it's kind of a stylistic tool that you use the offensive stuff, and basically he's taken away this whole toolkit that is part of the game and still
He's still
competing. So that
competing
is
at an
really,
elite level, right? Like,
yeah,
which is just incredible, for somebody to have made such a change, taken a tool out of their toolbox, a tool that everyone else uses, right? People make fun of him for his race and his sexuality, and he can still win battles without ever having to, lower the intellectual caliber of the art form, which is awesome.
yeah. Um, and yeah, I just wanted to agree with you on another point that you said because, especially for me as a non-native speaker, battle rap also showed me like or it helped me learn the language so much better because then there's a line and everyone goes "Wah," goes crazy and then you're like, oh, why did they just go crazy? And then you understand like the word plays, the double entendres, the triple entendres, and you're like, oh yeah, this is really poetic art. It's crazy.
When I was learning French, I actually listened to just French rap, not even battle rap, because
Mm,
for the similar reason, because you get to learn a little bit more of the nuance of the language, these double and triple entendres, and which
I-
you may not learn if you're just listening to like boring French song, some sort of love song that is very simple sentence structure and grammatical structure, and no political references or these triple entendres. I don't actually even know what a triple entendre is in English, but
but yeah, that's a really great point of rap and hip hop. It just always, to me at least, was a very lyrical art form. It wasn't like about the sound, which maybe pop is more about, not about being catchy, but it's actually about the lyrics. That's
Mhm.
what I really
No,
like about it.
you're absolutely right. The lyrics, the words are such an essential part of this. Not the only component. Again, presence does matter, but it was fun.
Right. Right. Um, well, Nick, I really enjoyed our conversation. We touched so many different things, and I feel like I could ask you so many more questions and get some valuable insights out of you. But yeah, we already touched a lot of interesting things. So to end it, if you again just want to tell the people where they can get in touch with you, where they can find out about your company, anything where you're available online, where people can check stuff out.
Sure. For Ideascale, our website is ideascale.com. By the way, our software is completely free for teams up to 100 people. So whether you're an entrepreneur
Oh,
or you're a 99-person team within a $1 billion company, our software is completely free. I highly encourage people to check it out. It's used by millions of people around the world already. If you want to get in touch with me personally, best ways through LinkedIn. My name is Nick Jain. Um, it's at the bottom of the screen there. So DM me. I respond to 100% of messages on LinkedIn. So feel free to DM me.
easy, super cool. Um, So just again, Nick, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your insights, your journey with us. And yeah, I hope you
Oh,
enjoy the rest of your day.
thank you so much, Mike, for having me on the show and for being such a great host.
Thank you. And with that, goodbye, everyone.